You eat a massive, like a
Yeah.
super nutrient-dense lunch. You drink a double espresso. You just consumed um, thousands of units of raw energy.
Yeah.
And yet, like an hour later, you're sitting at your desk, staring blankly at your laptop screen, practically
It's
comatose.
completely drained.
Exactly.
Oh.
I mean, on paper, you should be vibrating with vitality. Your biological bank account just got a huge deposit. So where did it go? Why is your internal battery completely dead at 2 in the afternoon?
It's the classic crash.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. If you're listening to this, you're probably pretty tired of that exact crash. Today, we're taking on a massive mission, really. We are decoding the actual physical secrets of human vitality.
And it's a profound shift in perspective.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we're bridging the ancient wisdom of traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, with the bleeding-edge discoveries of modern biophysics and, well, cellular biology. And we're not just philosophizing here. By the end of this deep dive, you're going to have a highly specific, actionable daily schedule to optimize your cellular energy.
Yeah, which is so needed. Because it's sort of the ultimate paradox of modern life, isn't it? I mean, we have more access to high-calorie food and chemical stimulants than any humans in history, and yet we are chronically systemically exhausted.
We're exhausted all the time.
All the time. And that brings us to really a fundamental flaw in how we view human energy. What's fascinating here is that while Western medicine is incredibly powerful, it's often very reductionist. It isolates specific pathways. But TCM is holistic. It views the body as this interconnected ecosystem. In the West, we treat ourselves exactly like the smartphone sitting in our pockets. We operate on this battery model.
Right. The idea that you wake up at 100%. You just drain yourself down to 1% through sheer willpower and excessive caffeine.
And stress.
Yeah, and stress. And then you plug yourself into a bed for 7 hours and you just hope you reboot by morning. It's incredibly transactional.
It is. And it's a model of inevitable decline. Because think about it. What happens to a lithium-ion battery over time?
The maximum capacity shrinks.
Exactly. It degrades. You're charging it to 100%, sure, but the battery itself is physically smaller. That's how most people view aging and energy. TCM, however, doesn't view the body as a battery at all. It views it as a house, a dynamic, living thermal ecosystem.
I love this analogy so much because if your body is a drafty house with, thin windows and zero insulation, your internal furnace has to work constantly just to maintain a baseline temperature of 98.6 degrees.
Right, it's always running.
Yeah, you are shoveling coal, meaning food and coffee, into the furnace, burning massive amounts of fuel. But the energy is just bleeding out through the cracks.
Precisely. You aren't lacking fuel, you're lacking structural integrity and efficient combustion. The goal of these ancient vitality practices isn't to just keep, frantically recharging a degrading battery. The goal is to weatherproof the house.
Oh, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah, because when you seal the energetic leaks through specific breathing mechanics, physical posture, and metabolic timing, the furnace doesn't have to work nearly as hard. You retain the energy you produce. And because you're retaining it, your baseline capacity actually expands. You go from a baseline of, say, 10 units of daily energy to 15, then 20.
Wow. So you're actively increasing the size of the battery, not just slowing the drain. Okay, to understand how we actually do this, how we, weatherproof the house, we need to map the ancient terminology to our actual biology. We hear the word ki thrown around in martial arts movies and yoga studios all the time.
Yeah.
But in the medical text, ki is part of a very specific triad known as the three treasures, right? Jing, Qi, and Qin. So let's break these down for the listener, starting with Jing. What exactly is our foundational essence?
So Jing translates roughly to essence, and you can think of it as your deep fundamental biological reserve. It's stored in the kidneys, according to the text, and it's largely inherited from your parents.
Okay, so it's genetic.
Exactly. In modern biological terms, Jing maps incredibly well to your genetics, your DNA, your constitutional makeup, and specifically your telomere length and stem cell reserves. It is the deep organic foundation of your physical structure.
So Jing is basically, it's the genetic trust fund you're born with. You inherit a certain amount of principle, and it dictates your absolute baseline constitution. Some people are born with massive trust funds. They can smoke cigars and drink whiskey until they're 90 and be fine.
We all know someone like that, yeah.
Right. And then others are born with smaller funds and have to be much more careful with their lifestyle.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Prenatal Jing is established at conception. It is the physical architecture. Now, the second treasure is Qi. If Jing is the physical structure and the genetic blueprint, Qi is the dynamic energy that animates it.
The actual moving parts.
Right. It's the heat, the movement, the electrical impulses, the metabolism. Qi warms the body, it circulates the blood, transforms food into tissue, and mounts the immune defense against pathogens. It functions right alongside Jing.
Got it. And then the third treasure sitting on top of that is Shen.
Yes. Shen translates to spirit or consciousness. It rules your mental, emotional, and creative functions. It's your awareness, your psychological resilience, your higher cognitive processing.
So we have the blueprint, which is Qing, the animating energy, which is Qi, and the guiding consciousness, which is Shen. Let's zoom in on the Qi, because this is really where the metabolic magic happens for our daily energy. The ancient texts outline a highly specific step-by-step formula for how the body manufactures energy. It's not some, mystical ether, right? It's an actual biochemical pathway. So how do we actually make Qi?
Right, it's very mechanical. It starts with the understanding that while your prenatal Jing is finite, you must constantly generate postnatal Qi to survive. The factory floor for this is your digestive system, specifically the spleen and stomach in TCM. They process the food and liquid you ingest to create something called gu qi, which translates to food qi or grain qi.
Okay, so gu qi is basically the raw macro and micronutrients, the glucose, the fatty acids, the amino acids, stripped from our lunch.
Exactly, is the biochemical fuel. But gu qi alone cannot be used by the body. It's just inert potential at that point. It must be transported upward to the chest, to the lungs, where it interacts with kong qi.
Kong qi.
Yes, kong qi is air qi, the energy extracted from the atmosphere. When the dietary fuel, the gu qi, and the atmospheric oxygen, the kong qi, combine in the chest, they form zong qi, known as gathering qi.
I've always found it really fascinating that the traditional Chinese character for qi actually illustrates this perfectly. It's an ideogram made of the symbol for uncooked rice on the bottom and steam or vapor rising on the top.
Yes, it's very literal.
Right, it literally depicts the combustion of food and air to create energy.
It's a beautifully literal depiction, yeah. But gathering tea is still just a precursor. It needs an ignition source. That catalyst is yuan qi, or original qi, which rises from the kidneys. Think of yuan qi as the deep pilot light drawing from your jing.
So the trust fund provides the spark.
Exactly. It sparks the gathering qi, catalyzing a transformation into zen qi, which translates to true qi.
True qi. So that's the final, refined, usable energy currency of the human body.
Yes, and this true qi immediately bifurcates into two distinct roles. It becomes yin qi, the nutritive qi that flows deep inside the blood vessels and meridians to repair tissue and nourish the organs. And it becomes wei qi, the defensive qi that flows swiftly on the exterior in the subcutaneous layers.
And that defensive qi is doing what exactly?
It's regulating body temperature, opening and closing the pores, and fighting off external pathogens. It's your immune shield.
Okay, here is where this gets completely mind-blowing for anyone with a background in modern biology. This ancient poetic formula, food, combining with air, ignited by a deep internal spark to create a universal energy currency, maps flawlessly onto modern mitochondrial function and oxidative phosphorylation. Let's talk about ATP, because this is the cellular origin of all of this.
The parallels are just undeniable. We know the mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. What does a mitochondria need to perform cellular respiration? It requires glucose and fatty acids from our diet, our gu qi, and it requires oxygen delivered by our red blood cells, our com qi.
Food and air, the exact same inputs entering the mitochondrial matrix.
Entering the matrix and undergoing the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. In this process, electrons are passed down a chain of proteins, pumping protons across a membrane to create an electrochemical gradient. That gradient, that deep inherited mechanism of life, acts like the pilot light, the yuan qi.
Wow.
The protons flow back through an enzyme called ATP synthase, physically spinning it like a tiny motor to churn out ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
And ATP is the biochemical unit of qi. I mean, it is the literal physical molecule of true qi. It powers every muscle contraction, every firing of a neuron, every single act of cellular repair.
Exactly. Without ATP, biological life ceases in seconds. When TCM texts describe a patient with robust qi, they have a warm body, a strong bounding pulse, bright eyes, and physical stamina, they are describing a human being with profoundly efficient, highly functioning mitochondrial networks.
To visualize this, the text used the metaphor of the furnace, the bellows, and the cauldron. Let's unpack that imagery really quick because it dictates how we're going to build our daily schedule later.
Right, so the furnace represents your digestive system and your metabolic organs. It's the heavy, physical infrastructure where the fuel is broken down. The bellows represent your respiratory system, your lungs, and your diaphragm.
Breathing life into it.
Literally. The bellows fan the flames of the furnace, providing the precise amount of oxygen needed for clean combustion. If the bellows are weak, the fire smolders. If they are too aggressive, the fire burns out of control.
And sitting on top of this metabolic fire is the cauldron.
The cauldron is your mind, your brain, your Shen. It contains the water of consciousness. The heat from the furnace, fanned by the bellows, rises to warm the cauldron, allowing the water to transform into steam, representing higher awareness, focus, and psychological resilience.
So if your furnace is broken, say, you have terrible gut health and can't absorb nutrients, or if your bellows are weak because you're hunched over a desk breathing shallowly into your chest all day, the fire dies. Your cauldron is just ice cold.
Exactly.
And the clinical result of that, brain fog, depression, apathy, zero focus. You can't just fix the cauldron by thinking harder. You have to fix the fire beneath it.
Which brings us back to the trust fund analogy. Remember, Jing is finite. As our telomeres shorten and we age, our prenatal essence declines. That is biological reality.
Hold on, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. If Jing is constantly draining and it can't be replaced, aren't we just leaky batteries anyway? Like, aren't we all just slowly bleeding out our trust fund until we die?
We are spending it, yes. But the rate at which you spend your Jing is entirely within your control. That is the great secret of ancient longevity practices. If your furnace and bellows are weak, meaning your daily production of postnatal qi, your ATP from food and air is insufficient. Your body doesn't just shut down right away. It has to keep the lights on.
So what does it do?
It goes to the vault. It dips into your savings account. It starts burning your precious kidney Jing to compensate for the lack of daily energy.
Wow. So if I have a terrible diet and I don't breathe properly, my body literally eats its own deep reserves just to get me through a Tuesday afternoon. I'm accelerating my own cellular aging.
You are burning the structural foundation of your house to keep the living room warm. However, if you cultivate a robust, highly efficient production of postnatal qi, if your mitochondria are churning out massive amounts of ATP every single day, you don't need to touch the vault. You live off the interest, not the principal. You preserve your Jing, thereby extending your vitality significantly.
Live off the interest, not the principle. That completely reframes the biological purpose of eating and breathing. It's not just about getting through the day, it's about protecting the vault. Okay, so we've established the fuel. We know we're turning food and air into ATP, which is qi. Now we need to look at the engine itself. How does this energy actually circulate through the human machine? This is where we dive into yin-yang and the Zhang-Fu organ systems. We have to start with yin and yang, which is, way more than just a cool tattoo design.
Oh, absolutely. It is the unifying theory of all Chinese medicine. Yin and yang are not static things. They are opposing but mutually dependent forces in a constant state of dynamic equilibrium. You cannot understand the human body without understanding this pulse.
Let's give it some concrete biological anchors. We assume our listeners know basic physiology, so let's map it.
Sure. So yin represents the internal, the cooling, the restorative, the physical structure, the fluids, and crucially, the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state. It is anabolic, it builds tissue. Yang represents the external, the warming, the functional activity, the heat, and the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight state. It is catabolic, it expends energy.
They define each other. You can't have function without structure, and structure needs function to be maintained. But they also consume each other, right? Like if you run a massive fever in extreme yang state, you sweat out all your fluids and become severely dehydrated. The yang literally burned up your yin.
Yes, and at extreme biological limits, they actually transform into one another.
What do you mean?
Well, consider a person suffering from profound hypothermia and extreme life-threatening yin state. Right before death, many hypothermia victims experience a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, they suddenly feel burning hot and tear off their clothes. Why? Because the body, completely starved of thermal energy, triggers a desperate, final, massive dump of catecholamines, a violent spike of yang attempting to generate heat out of nothing because of inadequate energy supply. It's a critical state of biological relativity. The system flips.
That is a terrifying and brilliant example of the dynamic shifting. So we have this autonomic pulse of yin and yang driving our metabolism. How does the ancient system map this onto our actual organs that use the Zhang-Fu classification?
Right. The internal organs are categorized by their energetic nature. The Zhang organs are the yin organs. These are the solid, highly vascularized organs: liver, heart, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Their primary physiological duty is to manufacture, store, and carefully preserve the vital substances: the jing, the blood, the qi, the bodily fluids. The classical texts say they store and do not drain.
So the Zhang organs are the high-security, climate-controlled vaults. They hold the precious inventory. And the Fu organs.
The fu organs are the yang organs. These are the hollow organs: the gallbladder, small intestines, stomach, large intestine, bladder, and the energetic concept of the triple burner. Their duty is to receive food, break it down, absorb the immediate nutrients, and excrete the waste. They drain and do not store. They are constantly in motion, moving matter through the lumen of the body.
It's a massive, bustling factory. The Fu organs are the loud, active assembly lines and the waste management pipes, constantly processing raw material. And the Zhang organs are the quiet, protected vaults where the refined ATP and structural proteins are stored. But this factory doesn't just run randomly, does it? It's governed by a beautiful, interconnected operating system called the five-element theory.
Exactly. The five elements, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water, are not literal physical substances. They are phases of energy, archetypes of movement, that categorize how our organ systems interact with each other, with their emotions, and with the external environment.
Let's walk through these, because understanding this web is the only way the daily schedule we're going to build makes any sense. Let's start with wood.
Okay, wood governs the liver and the gallbladder. Its season is spring. Think of the energy of wood as upward, expansive, and pushing boundaries like a plant breaking through the soil in spring. Biologically, the liver stores blood and glycogen, ensuring the smooth, unrestricted flow of energy and nutrients throughout the body. When wood is balanced, you have clear vision, decisive planning, and metabolic flexibility.
But there's an emotional component too, right?
Yes, its associated emotion is anger and frustration. When you are chronically frustrated, the wood energy stagnates.
The expansive energy just gets trapped. Okay, next is fire.
Fire governs the heart and the small intestine, as well as the brain and shen. Its season is summer, the peak of metabolic heat and activity. Fire is about circulation, cardiovascular output, and consciousness. Its emotion is joy. But excess fire, like manic overstimulation or chronic insomnia, burns out the body's cooling fluids.
Fire. Then we move to the center. Earth.
Earth governs the spleen and stomach. Its season is late summer, a time of dampness and heavy transition. Earth is the central pivot. It is the factory floor where digestion happens, where the enteric nervous system operates. Its emotion is worry or obsessive overthinking. Chronic worry literally knots up the earth energy, completely halting digestion.
Wow, okay, so that's wood, fire, earth. What about metal?
Metal governs the lungs and the large intestine. Its season is autumn, a time of gathering inward and letting go of the dead leaves. Metal energy is descending and refining. Biologically, it's about gas exchange and the mucosal immune system, your Wei Qi defense. Its associated emotion is grief or sadness. Deep grief physically restricts the lungs. You sigh, your chest caves in, your oxygen intake drops.
That makes total sense. And finally, water.
Water governs the kidneys and the bladder. Its season is winter, the time of maximum yin, deep storage, and hibernation. Water holds the jing, the stem cells, the deep hormonal reserves of the adrenal cortex. Its energy is foundational and consolidating. Its emotion is fear.
So fear affects the kidneys.
Exactly. Chronic ambient fear or trauma constantly triggers the adrenals, draining the water element and exhausting the deep reserves.
It is an incredibly elegant map of psychoneuroimmunology. But these elements aren't isolated silos. They drive each other through what are called the generation and suppression cycles. How does the generation cycle work?
The generation cycle is often called the mother-child relationship. It dictates how one organ system naturally promotes and fuels the next. It flows in a circle. Water generates wood, just as deep reserves nourish upward growth. Wood generates fire. The liver provides the glycogen and blood to fuel the heart and brain.
And then fire feeds earth.
Right, fire generates earth. The metabolic heat of the cardiovascular system warms the digestive organs. Earth generates metal. The nutrients extracted from food build the structural integrity of the lungs and immune system. And metal generates water. The lungs descend fluids down to the kidneys for filtration and storage.
So that's the anabolic, supportive loop. Water feeds wood. Wood feeds fire. But a system based only on growth would become cancerous, right? It would spin out of control. That's where the suppression cycle comes in.
Exactly. The suppression cycle is the physiological braking system. It maintains homeostasis. In this star-shaped pattern across the elements, water extinguishes. Fire, the cooling fluids of the kidneys, keep the heart rate and mental mania in check. Fire melts. Metabolic heat prevents the lungs from becoming too rigid or cold.
Okay.
Metal chops, wood, the descending rhythm of the lungs prevents the liver's expansive energy from rising too aggressively and causing migraines or hypertension. Wood parts earth. The active flow of the liver breaks up stagnation in the digestive tract. And earth dams water. The structural integrity of the digestive system manages fluid metabolism so we don't become edematous or swollen.
Generation for growth, suppression for control. It's the ultimate biological checks and balances system. And when this factory is running perfectly, true qi and blood flow smoothly through the body's highway system, the 12 primary meridians and the 8 extraordinary channels, bathing every single cell in nutrients and ATP. But what happens when a wrench gets thrown into the gears? What actually impedes our energy production?
This is where we transition from physiology to pathology. The drop in ATP production, the stagnation of qi, is the root of all modern disease in TCM, and these blockages arise from two distinct vectors: external environmental factors and internal emotional extremes.
Let's tackle the external ones first. The ancient texts call them pernicious evils, which, it sounds incredibly dramatic like a fantasy novel, but it's actually highly practical environmental biophysics, right?
It is. The pernicious evils are environmental climates that invade the body when our defensive qi, our wei qi, or mucosal immunity is compromised. They are categorized by their yin or yang nature. The yang types are wind, summer heat, and fire. They are volatile. They attack the upper body, the lungs, and the head. They induce rapid, acute symptoms, high fevers, intense sweating, acute inflammation, and sudden tremors.
And the yin evils.
The yin types are cold and dampness. These are insidious. Because they are heavy in yin, they sink to the lower body. They cause stagnation. Dampness manifests as swelling, edema, systemic candida, brain fog, and a heavy lethargic feeling in the limbs. Cold physically constricts the blood vessels, causing sharp joint pain and completely slowing down metabolic enzyme activity.
Think about that feeling when you're stuck outside in freezing, sleeting rain without a proper coat. The cold and dampness physically penetrate your joints. Your mitochondrial furnace has to suddenly divert massive amounts of ATP away from your brain and digestion just to shiver and generate enough thermal heat to keep your core alive. It's a massive energetic tax.
Yes, exactly. But while environmental exposure is a factor, in our modern climate-controlled world, the internal causes of disease are far more destructive. These are the emotional extremes. Remember, every Zhang organ is physically tethered to an emotion. When a psychological state becomes chronic, it induces a physical pathology in its corresponding organ.
Okay, we need to map this out clearly because this is the reality for like 90% of people listening. We're going to take a modern scenario, the chronically stressed, overworked corporate employee, and we're going to run them through the 5-element breakdown. Walk me through exactly how a toxic day at the office destroys cellular ATP.
Okay, let's trace the exact biophysical cascade. Imagine our worker is dealing with a micromanaging boss. They are constantly dealing with suppressed frustration, unspoken anger, and tension. According to the 5 elements, anger and stress directly impact the liver, the wood element. The primary function of wood is smooth, expansive flow. But because the anger is suppressed, the wood energy stagnates. The liver becomes energetically hyperactive and physically tense.
So the liver is swollen with stuck, frustrated energy. What happens next?
Now we look at the suppression cycle. Normally, wood suppresses earth just enough to keep digestion active. But when wood becomes hyperactive and swollen with stress, it doesn't just suppress earth, it overacts on it. It attacks it. In TCM, this pathology is called wood subjugating earth. The angry, stagnant liver energetically bullies the spleen and stomach.
So you're telling me my bad mood at work is literally bullying my digestive system?
Yes, exactly. When the earth element is subjugated, the digestive factory shuts down. The spleen loses its ability to transform food into qi. You might be eating a healthy lunch, but your body isn't extracting the nutrients. If you produce less qi, you have fewer raw materials to send up to the lungs to mix with oxygen.
Less qi plus Kong qi equals less Zong qi, which means a massive drop in ATP production at the cellular level. This completely explains why when I'm furious or stressed, my stomach ties itself in a knot, I get acid reflux.
Right, and it maps perfectly to modern neurobiology. The wood element reacting to stress is the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. It floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline. What does the sympathetic nervous system do? It immediately shunts blood away from the digestive organs and routes it to the skeletal muscles for fight or flight. It induces vagal withdrawal, completely shutting down the parasympathetic rest and digest function, which is the earth element. TCM mapped out the exact mechanics of sympathetic dominance thousands of years before we knew what cortisol was.
But the cascade doesn't stop there, does it? Because the five elements are a closed loop.
It doesn't stop. Because the earth element is shut down, less fuel is being produced. This causes the liver qi to stagnate even further. Now look at the generation cycle. Wood is supposed to generate fire. The liver is supposed to provide the smooth flow of blood and fuel to the heart and the brain. But a stagnated, knotted liver fails to send that vital fuel, oxygen, plasma proteins, glucose, upward to the brain.
So the brain, the fire element, the cauldron, is effectively starved of ATP.
Precisely. This raises an important question, How our mental state dictates our physical reality, and vice versa. When the brain is starved of cellular energy, what are the clinical symptoms? Profound brain fog, chronic fatigue, lethargy, and ultimately clinical depression. We tend to view depression in Western medicine as a localized neurochemical imbalance in the brain. We try to fix the fire element in isolation.
Right, with a pill.
Right. But this holistic model shows us that the fire is dying because the wood is blocking the fuel, because the earth isn't digesting the food, because the environment is too stressful. The Shen, the mind, is collapsing because the biological platform has failed. The ancient concept of the spleen ruling digestion and muscle energy perfectly links to modern stress responses, shutting down the parasympathetic nervous system.
That is just, it fundamentally changes how you view a bad mood. It's not just in your head, it is a systemic metabolic cascade. Because ancient physicians understood this interconnected web, they developed diagnostic methods to detect these subtle systemic abnormalities before they became full-blown diseases. They didn't have blood panels or MRIs. How did they see the internal factory from the outside?
Well, they relied on the fact that the internal Zangfu organs are directly connected to the exterior of the body via the meridian pathways. Internal disharmony always leaves an external footprint. They developed 4 pillars of diagnosis: inspection, auscultation, and olfaction, which is listening and smelling, questioning, and palpation, specifically pulse taking.
Let's talk about inspection. Looking at the patient, what are they actually looking for?
Posture, complexion, the brightness of the eyes, which reflects the Shen. But the most critical part of inspection is the tongue. The tongue is considered a highly vascularized microcosm of the internal organs. The tip corresponds to the heart and lungs, the upper burner. The center corresponds to the spleen and stomach, the middle burner. The root corresponds to the kidneys and intestines, the lower burner.
So it's a literal map. If I look in the mirror in the morning, what am I looking for?
You're looking at the body of the tongue and the coating. A normal tongue is light red with a thin, clear white coating. If the tongue body is pale, swollen, and has teeth marks along the edges.
Wait, teeth marks?
Yes, scalloped edges where it presses against the teeth. That clearly indicates spleen qi deficiency and systemic dampness. Your earth element is weak and retaining fluid. If the tongue has a thick, greasy yellow coating at the root, it indicates damp heat accumulating in the lower organs. Modern science is just now catching up to this by analyzing the oral microbiome and finding direct correlations between tongue biofilms and gastrointestinal disease.
That's incredible. What about listening and questioning?
Listening involves the timbre of the voice. A weak, breathy, reedy voice indicates lung qi deficiency. A loud, booming, aggressive voice might indicate liver fire. Questioning is an exhaustive interview. A TCM practitioner doesn't just ask where it hurts. They ask about your sleep architecture, your digestion, whether you prefer hot or cold drinks, if you sweat at night, and crucially, your emotional landscape. They are hunting for the elemental root.
But the crown jewel of this is pulse diagnosis. Whenever I've seen this done, it looks so mystical. A Western doctor grabs your wrist to count beats per minute. A TCM doctor places 3 fingers on your wrist and stares off into space for 5 minutes. What are they physically feeling for?
They are evaluating the hemodynamic telemetry of your entire cardiovascular system. In TCM, the pulse is palpated at 3 distinct positions on the radial artery of each wrist, known as the Kun, Guan, and Qi positions. Furthermore, they press at 3 different depths: superficial, middle, and deep.
3 positions, 3 depths on 2 wrists. That's 18 distinct locations.
Yes, and each location corresponds to a specific Zhang or Fu organ. The practitioner is not just counting the rate. They are evaluating the width, the length, the strength, and the fluid quality of the arterial wave. There are 28 classical pulse qualities.
Give me some examples. What does a stressed pulse feel like versus a healthy one?
If we go back to our stressed corporate worker with the hyperactive liver, their pulse will likely feel wiry. A wiry pulse feels tight, long, and taut, exactly like a guitar string pressing back against your fingers. It indicates high vascular resistance and liver qi stagnation.
Blood pressure is up, vessels are constricted.
Exactly. Conversely, if someone has a slippery pulse, it feels smooth, rounded, and flowing, like pearls rolling in a porcelain dish. This indicates dampness, phlegm, or even pregnancy, a state of excess fluid volume. If the pulse is thready or fine, feeling like a tiny silk thread that disappears when you press hard, it indicates profound qi and blood deficiency. The furnace is running out of fuel. By mapping these qualities across the 18 positions, a skilled practitioner can tell exactly which element is subjugating another before the patient even reports a symptom.
It's basically an analog ultrasound of the vascular system. Okay, now that we know how to spot the leaks in our energy system through pulse taking and daily awareness, how do we fix them using both ancient tools and modern tech? We need to restore homeostasis. Let's dive into the therapeutic approaches for organ disharmony, the herbal pharmacology, and the dietary habits that rebuild ATP. Let's start with the physical interventions. How does sticking a needle in my arm acupuncture actually fix my liver?
Acupuncture involves inserting ultrafine filiform needles into highly specific points along the meridian pathways. For decades, Western medicine dismissed this as placebo, but modern biophysics has revealed the profound mechanisms at play. Acupuncture points are physically located at areas of high electrical conductivity, often where nerve bundles penetrate the fascia, the connective tissue that wraps our muscles and organs.
So when the needle goes in, what is physically happening on a cellular level?
Several things. First, mechanotransduction. The winding of the needle physically twists the collagen fibers in the fascia, sending a mechanical signal to the fibroblasts to reduce inflammation. Second, purinergic signaling. The microtrauma of the needle causes local cells to release ATP and adenosine. Adenosine binds to local receptors and acts as a potent, localized analgesic, instantly reducing pain.
It forces the cells to dump their own painkillers.
Yes. But systemically, the needle insertion stimulates the somatic sensory nerves, sending signals up the spinal cord to the brainstem and the hypothalamus. This triggers a massive modulation of the autonomic nervous system. Remember our stressed worker. Acupuncture forcibly dials down the sympathetic yang response and upregulates the parasympathetic yin response. It stops the wood from attacking the earth, allowing blood to return to the digestive tract so ATP production can resume.
It's a manual override switch for the nervous system.
Yeah.
What about moxibustion? That's the therapy where they burn the herb mugwort near the skin.
Moxibustion is a profoundly warming, yang-invigorating therapy. By burning compressed Artemisia vulgaris or mugwort over specific points, it drives intense, penetrating infrared heat and deep into the tissue.
Why not just use a heating pad? Why burn an herb?
Because the specific wavelength of infrared radiation emitted by burning mugwort is highly resonant with human tissue. It stimulates the TRPV receptors in the skin, which govern thermoregulation. Moxibustion physically drives out yin evils like cold and dampness that are lodged in the joints. Furthermore, it stimulates mitochondrial uncoupling and thermogenesis. It tells the mitochondria to aggressively produce heat and ATP. It is a lifeline for someone suffering from profound yang deficiency, the person who is always freezing, pale, and lethargic.
Okay, so that's structural and thermal repair. Now let's talk about the biochemistry. Let's explore herbalism. The Chinese pharmacopoeia categorizes herbs into four main panifying categories, right? Yang invigorating, qi invigorating, yin nourishing, and blood enriching. We're looking to build our baseline energy, so let's focus on qi and yang herbs. What are the heavy hitters and what do they actually do to our cells?
Let's start with astragalus, known as Huang Qi. It is a premier qi-invigorating tonic, particularly for the lungs and the spleen. From a modern pharmacological perspective, astragalus is a powerhouse. It contains active compounds called astragalicides. Research has shown that astragalicide high V protects mitochondria from oxidative stress, increases ATP production, and remarkably can even activate telomerase, the enzyme that protects and lengthens our telomeres.
Wait, really? It activates telomerase. So it is literally biologically preserving our jing, our deep genetic reserve.
The preliminary data strongly suggests it slows cellular senescence, yes. It weatherproofs the house at a genetic level. Another incredibly famous herb is ginseng, or ren shen,
Right, the ultimate energy root. They put it in every gas station energy drink.
and that is a massive mistake. Ginseng is a powerful adaptogen. It contains ginsenosides that drastically increase endurance, modulate the HPA axis, and improve mitochondrial efficiency. It provides a massive surge of yang energy. However, in TCM, herbs are deeply customized to the individual's constitution. Ginseng is very, very warming.
So if I'm already stressed, agitated, and running hot, taking ginseng is a bad idea.
It's like throwing gasoline on a raging fire. If a person has excess heat, or if they have yin deficiency, meaning their cooling fluids are depleted and they suffer from night sweats and insomnia, giving them a myelin, ginseng will make them manic. It will spike their blood pressure and severely damage their internal ecosystem. Ginseng is a miracle for a cold, depleted, yang-deficient person. It is poison for a hot, agitated person.
That is the danger of ripping ancient medicine out of its holistic context and selling it as a generic supplement. You have to know your elemental baseline. What about an herb that balances the system?
Schisandra, or uwezai, is excellent for this. It's a 5-flavor berry that acts as an astringent. It helps secure the essence, preventing the leakage of qi and fluids. Modernly, we know it's a profound hepatoprotective agent. It upregulates the NRF2 pathway in the liver, massively boosting the body's endogenous antioxidant production. It clears the detox pathways so the liver, the wood element, doesn't stagnate.
So we have the manual override of acupuncture and the biochemical upgrades of herbs. But neither of those matter if we're sabotaging ourselves 3 times a day at the dinner table. We need to talk about specific dietary habits. The ancient texts place supreme, non-negotiable emphasis on focusing on the spleen, the earth element pivot. And their #1 dietary rule completely obliterates modern wellness culture.
It really does. The absolute consensus in TCM dietary therapy is that you must avoid excessive consumption of cold and raw foods.
No ice water, no huge bowls of raw kale, no frozen acai bowls for breakfast. Why? People think raw food has the most intact enzymes. Why is it so detrimental to our energy production?
It comes down to the literal thermodynamics of digestion. Let's go back to the cauldron analogy. Your stomach is a biological cauldron. For your digestive enzymes like pepsin and amylase to function, they require an optimal core temperature of roughly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
Enzyme kinetics are heavily dependent on temperature.
Okay, basic biochemistry.
Now, imagine you drink a 16-ounce glass of ice water and eat a massive, raw, cold salad straight from the refrigerator. You have just dumped a freezing payload directly into the cauldron. The temperature of the stomach plummets. Enzyme activity instantly halts. Digestion stops.
The fire goes out.
Precisely. Now, the body has a physiological emergency. It cannot process the food until it is warmed up. So the body must divert valuable yang qi, meaning it has to burn massive amounts of ATP to generate mitochondrial heat just to warm that icy food up to body temperature before digestion can even begin.
It's an energetic tax. You're spending a fortune in baseline ATP just to heat up the food, and you're likely spending more energy than you're getting out of that cold salad.
It is a net negative transaction. If you do this chronically year after year, you extinguish the digestive fire of the spleen. You induce spleen-yang deficiency. The furnace breaks. This is why so many people eating healthy, raw, vegan diets end up with profound bloating, loose stools, chronic fatigue, cold hands and feet, and systemic dampness. Their earth element is completely frozen.
So what's the solution?
You must pre-digest your food with thermal heat. Eat warm cooked foods, soups, stews, bone broths, lightly steamed vegetables, roasted root vegetables. You use the heat of the stove to break down the cellular walls of the food, so your internal mitochondria don't have to waste precious ATP doing it for you. You want every meal to be a net positive deposit into your energy account.
That makes profound logical sense. Why force your body to work harder than it has to? Just cook the food.
Yeah.
Now, before we build our daily schedule, we have to address a paradox in everything we just talked about regarding boosting energy. This ties into a framework called biological relativity.
Right. Biological relativity is the understanding that higher-order psychological functions, your Shen, your spiritual resilience, are entirely dependent on optimizing the cellular foundation, the ATP first. You cannot meditate your way out of mitochondrial failure. But there is a biological trap when we try to aggressively boost that platform.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when we take these yang tonifying herbs or we do things to aggressively upregulate our ATP production, we create exhaust.
It is the inescapable dualism of yin and yang at the cellular level. When your mitochondria process oxygen and glucose to generate ATP, which is yang activity, They unavoidably produce reactive oxygen species, or ROS, as a byproduct. ROS are free radicals. They are the biochemical exhaust of the furnace. In small amounts, they act as signaling molecules. But in excess, they cause severe oxidative stress, mutating DNA, destroying lipid membranes, and accelerating aging.
So if we just blindly boost our yang to get more energy, we're literally rusting ourselves from the inside out with the exhaust. We age ourselves faster.
Exactly. You burn too hot and melt the engine. This is why yin is absolutely vital. Yin represents the body's cooling, nourishing fluids. Biochemically, yin perfectly correlates with the body's endogenous antioxidant defense systems, enzymes like superoxide dismutase and glutathione. These antioxidants quench the ROS, neutralizing the free radicals.
They act as the coolant for the engine.
Therefore, the grand unified theory of energy optimization is this. You cannot simply boost yang and ATP. You must simultaneously deeply nourish yin antioxidants and hydration to balance the yang and absorb the increased oxidative load. If you increase the size of the fire, you must increase the thickness of the cauldron or it will melt.
That is the ultimate biological truth.
Okay.
We have all the puzzle pieces on the table. We understand the ancient organ maps, the cellular biology, the elemental traps, the diagnostic signals, the herbs, and the dietary rules. It is time to deliver on our promise. We are going to build a concrete, energy-optimized daily and weekly schedule for you, the listener, to maximize your ATP, Qi, and Prana. We are mapping out a highly structured, practical routine based on the 5-element principles and Zhang Fu organ relationships. Let's start with the morning. The alarm goes off. What is the very first thing we do?
The morning is governed by the natural rise of yang energy in the environment. We want to gently stimulate and catch that upward biological wave. The absolute first action is photobiomodulation.
LED red and near-infrared light therapy. Sitting in front of a panel for 20 minutes. Why?
Because it is a direct exogenous energy input that doesn't tax the digestive system. Red and near-infrared light at specific wavelengths penetrate the skin and are absorbed directly by an enzyme in the mitochondria called cytochrome C-oxidase.
It's literally human photosynthesis.
It physically kicks electrons down the respiratory chain, directly stimulating the mitochondria to produce more ATP. It reduces systemic inflammation and immediately signals the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain that the day has begun, locking in your circadian rhythm. You want to do this for about 20 minutes.
Okay, so I'm sitting in front of my red light panel. Most people will use this time to scroll through their phone and check their work emails.
Which completely ruins the process. Looking at work emails triggers the sympathetic nervous system. It engages the wood element, the stress, and begins the cascade of subjugating the earth element before you've even eaten breakfast. Instead, while the light is hitting your skin, you engage the bellows. You perform 10 minutes of coherent breathing.
Let's get the specific mechanics of this. What is the cadence?
The clinically studied cadence for maximum autonomic balance is 0.1 hertz. That translates to one full breath cycle every 10 seconds. So a 5-second continuous inhale and a 5-second continuous exhale.
Why that specific rhythm?
Because breathing at 0.1 hertz creates a state of cardiovascular resonance. It synchronizes your respiratory rate with your blood pressure regulation, maximizing your heart rate variability. In TCM terms, this deep, rhythmic expansion of the bellows builds a massive reservoir of Zhang Qi gathering Qi in the chest, preparing it to be catalyzed into true Qi.
And what is the mind the cauldron doing during these 10 minutes?
It holds a single positive intention. Gratitude is highly effective. By coupling the rhythmic breathing with a positive emotional state, you nourish the fire element and you calm the Shen. You ensure that the qi you are generating is directed efficiently, rather than scattered by anxious thoughts.
Okay, we have the light feeding the furnace, the breath pumping the bellows, the mind calming the cauldron. What about the physical structure?
We must align the physical structure to allow the energy to flow. Next is a physical standing practice called Wuji meditation, or standing post, to unite body, breath, and mind.
Walk me through the posture.
You stand with your feet exactly shoulder-width apart. Your knees are slightly softly bent so you aren't locking the joints. Your spine is straight, as if suspended by a string from the crown of your head. Your arms are raised loosely in front of your chest, as if you are lightly hugging a large, fragile tree trunk. And then you seek a state of song.
Song. S-O-N-G. What does that mean physically?
It translates to profound, complete relaxation. It is a prerequisite for energy flow. It is not collapsing, though. It is releasing all muscular tension while maintaining the structural integrity of the posture through the fascia and tendons. In TCM, physical muscular tension acts like a dam in a river. If your shoulders are hiked up to your ears with stress, the qi and blood physically cannot flow to your hands.
It's related to the concept of tensegrity, right? Tensional integrity. You are aligning your skeletal structure so perfectly that the muscles don't have to strain to hold you upright.
Exactly. When you achieve song and wuji standing, the meridian pathways open completely. The ATP you just generated via the red light and the breath can now circulate without obstruction. Furthermore, the slight pressure on the leg bones generates a piezoelectric effect, gently stimulating the bone marrow and kidney jing. Standing in Wuji sets an unbreakable foundation of grounded, centered energy for the rest of the day.
That is a phenomenal morning protocol to support your organs and preserve your qi. But now we have to face reality. We leave the house, we hit traffic, we get to the office, and the chaos begins. It's the busy workday. How do we protect this energy we just built?
First and foremost, through dietary integration, we apply the thermal rules of the earth element. Eat warm, cooked foods to support the spleen-stomach pivot. Do not eat a cold salad while stressed at your desk.
So a warm soup, a stew, some rice, and cooked vegetables.
Yes. You provide easily assimilated Gucci that requires zero thermal taxation from your body. But beyond diet, you must actively apply element cycles during stressful transitions.
Let's say I just had a brutal Zoom meeting. I'm irritated, I'm behind schedule. The wood element, my liver is getting swollen and agitated.
If you let that agitation sit, it will overact and restrict energy, subjugate your spleen, shut down your digestion, and crash your energy for the rest of the afternoon. You must intercept the cascade. Before you transition to your next task, take just 2 to 3 minutes to perform a micro session of coherent breathing. But this time, focus on making the exhale longer than the inhale.
Say 4-second inhale and a 6 or 7-second exhale.
Exactly. A prolonged exhale physically acts as a brake on the vagus nerve. It forces the parasympathetic nervous system online, overriding the sympathetic spike. In elemental terms, it introduces the cooling fluid of water to extinguish the rising fire, and it relaxes the tense wood. It is a 2-minute microintervention that maintains internal homeostasis and prevents the liver from overacting.
Just 2 minutes to stop your boss from indirectly causing your digestive failure. That's powerful. Okay, we survived the workday, we get home, it's the evening. How do we wind down and how do we actively recover as part of our weekly guide?
The evening marks the environmental transition from yang to yin. We must mirror this internally. The goal is evening breathing, to enhance parasympathetic dominance, a yin state for sleep, and to clear the physical stagnation of the day. This is the optimal time to practice Qigong.
Let's demystify Qigong, because to a lot of Westerners, it just looks like, elderly people waving their arms very slowly in a park.
It is arguably the most sophisticated biomechanical engineering ever developed for the human body. Qigong movements are not just waving arms, they are precisely designed. Bending and stretching the body physically pumps qi through specific channels, stretching the meridians and massaging the internal Zhang Fu organs.
Give me a specific example of how a movement affects an organ.
Consider the Still Mountain set, or the 5 Animals Qigong set, which mimics the movements of different creatures. The tiger movements involve deep, gripping stances and intense glares. This strongly engages the tendons and the eyes, both of which are governed by the liver, the wood element. It physically pulls stagnant qi out of the liver. Or take the crane movements for the lung.
Expanding the rib cage.
Yes, it physically stretches the intercostal muscles and the fascia surrounding the lungs. Furthermore, simply tucking or lifting the chin during these movements physically stretches the conception vessel, a major energetic channel running down the midline of the torso. Qigong acts as a physical pump, wringing out the stagnant waste products from the tissue and drawing in fresh blood and qi.
Okay, so we have Qigong for clearing stagnation. But what about intense exercise? What about building raw power? The schedule we're looking at specifically mentions engaging in high-intensity interval training, or HIT, during the week. Where on earth does modern HIT fit into an ancient TCM framework?
HIT is the most effective modern tool we have to trigger mitochondrial biogenesis, the actual creation of new mitochondria. When you perform short, brutal bursts of intense physical output followed by short rest, it triggers a metabolic crisis in the cell, which responds by building more mitochondria.
You are literally building more engines for the factory, expanding the size of the battery.
Exactly. In TCM terms, a HIIT workout is a massive boost to yang qi. The intense cardiovascular output ignites the systemic circulation, violently mobilizes any stuck qi, and burns away dampness.
But there's a catch, right? The yin-yang
A
balance.
massive catch. Because HIIT is so intensely yang, it creates a massive amount of RS exhaust. If you do HII every single day, you will burn out your kidney jing and destroy your joints. You must follow intense yang output with profound yin recovery, deep sleep, hydration, antioxidant-rich warm foods, and restorative practices like Qigong.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to ask the ultimate busy person question. I'm looking at this daily schedule we just built. Red light therapy, 10 minutes of precise coherent breathing, standing like a tree in Wuji meditation, ensuring I cook all my lunches, taking micro-breathing breaks during the day, doing Qigong in the evening, and fitting in HIT workouts. Let's be real. How am I supposed to fit Qigong, HIT, and light therapy into a day where I'm already exhausted? Trying to execute all this is just going to spike my cortisol.
It is the ultimate pushback, and it's the defining paradox of modern life. We feel we are too busy to maintain the machine that allows us to be busy. To answer this, we should look at a brilliant piece of wisdom from Grandmaster Chen, a renowned Taiji master. A highly stressed, overworked student came to him and asked, "Master, how much should I practice every day?" Grandmaster Chen replied, "You should practice for 20 minutes a day."
That seems reasonable.
But then he added the caveat. He said, on really busy days, you should practice more. You should practice for an hour.
Practice more when you have less time. That sounds completely counterintuitive.
It does, until you understand the compounding mathematics of biological energy. Time is fixed. Energy is highly elastic. The time you spend cultivating your key breathing, standing, aligning your biology pays compound interest in stamina and mental clarity, allowing you to do better, more efficient work.
I see where you're going.
If you skip your 10 minutes of breathing to immediately jump into emails and save time, you engage the stress cascade. You starve your brain of ATP. You will likely spend the next 4 hours battling brain fog, making poor decisions, and operating at 40% capacity. But if you invest that time into firing up the furnace and calming the cauldron, your baseline ATP is so high that a 4-hour task might only take you 2 hours with better results.
You don't manage time. You manage energy. If your baseline ATP is high, everything you do takes less relative effort. You are weatherproofing the house, so the heat stays inside where you can use it.
Exactly. These simple daily checks and inputs transform your bodily furnace from a struggling, drafty fire into a highly efficient, self-sustaining engine.
That is a profound perspective shift. We have covered a colossal amount of ground today, from the genetics of Jing to the thermodynamics of a cold salad. For you, the learner listening right now, here is the core, unshakable takeaway. Energy isn't just some abstract substance you passively spend until you collapse. It is a dynamic biological force that you must actively manufacture, cultivate, and refine through highly specific, mindful daily inputs. From the temperature of your food to the rhythm of your breath, every single choice matters.
Indeed. You are the architect of your internal ecosystem, and to leave you with one final, truly awe-provoking connection to the bigger picture. Our bodies do not exist in a vacuum. We've established that our internal yin and yang balance is heavily influenced by the compass rose cycle and the natural cycles of the environment, and that our cellular mitochondria react directly to the light of the sun. But it goes deeper. We have to introduce the concept of cosmic resonance and the geomagnetic field, the GMFT.
The geomagnetic field.
Yes. The Earth's magnetic field fluctuates constantly. If our internal networks are so sensitive, to what extent are our physical bodies, our very cells, actually syncing with the shifting magnetic fields of the Earth itself? Are we, on a quantum biological level, literally plugging our internal energetic antennas into the magnetic resonance of the cosmos?
Cosmic resonance. The idea that by weatherproofing our internal house, we're actually tuning our biological radio dial to receive energy from the Earth itself. That is wild. It pushes the boundaries of everything we think we know about biology. So we leave you with this final provocative thought. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, before you instinctively reach for your phone to check your emails and trigger the systemic stress cascade, just pause.
Just pause.
Take just 3 coherent breaths at 0.1 hertz. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Feel that electrical energy pool in your lower abdomen, in your dantian. And ask yourself, what kind of qi are you manufacturing today?
A vital question for a vital life. Keep exploring.
Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep learning, keep breathing, and keep cultivating that energy.